Somewhere between Mars and Jupiter, there's a rock worth more than every economy on Earth combined. $10 quadrillion. Let that number sink in for a second. That's not science fiction. That's the estimated value of one single asteroid, 16 Psyche, a lump of metal floating quietly in space, waiting for someone to grab it. And here's the twist nobody's talking about. Getting that gold, platinum, and iridium back to Earth might soon be cheaper than digging a hole in the ground. Reusable rockets changed everything. What used to cost governments billions now costs private companies millions. And once launch is cheap, space stops being a frontier. It becomes a supply chain. So here's the real question. This video is built around what happens to human civilization when scarcity, the thing our entire economy is built on, simply disappears. Because this isn't just a story about rockets and rocks. It's a story about who wins, who loses, and who gets left completely behind. We're going to break this down in 6 parts, from the economics to the new geopolitics to a legal gray zone that honestly sounds made up. Spoiler, it's real. Quick honest question before we start. If someone handed you the deed to an asteroid worth $10 quadrillion, would you even know what to do with it? Stick around, because by the end of this video, that question is going to feel a lot less hypothetical than it does right now. Let's start with the obvious dream. Bring back enough gold and platinum from space, and everyone gets rich. Simple, right? Not even close. Precious metals aren't valuable just because they're shiny. They're valuable because they're rare. Remove the rarity, and you remove the value. That's not opinion. That's basic economics. Now, imagine bringing back not a few kilograms, but 100 tons of platinum in a single mission. What do you think happens to the price overnight? It crashes, possibly by more than 90%, which means the very companies chasing this trillion-dollar dream could accidentally destroy the market they were trying to cash in on. It's the ultimate economic paradox. The very abundance that was supposed to make us rich could be the thing that makes the resource worthless. So smart space mining companies won't dump everything at once. They'll release resources slowly, like a controlled drip to protect prices. Basically, space OPEC. But here's where it gets interesting. Not every metal behaves the same way. Some space resources aren't about being rare. They're about being useful. Water ice on asteroids can be split into hydrogen and oxygen, literally rocket fuel. That means asteroids aren't just mines, they're gas stations in space. And that changes the whole equation. The real gold rush isn't necessarily gold, it's fuel. Because fuel is what lets you go get everything else. So before we even talk about who owns what, one thing is already clear. This isn't just a mining industry. It's about to become an entirely new energy economy. And once there's an economy, there are always winners and losers. So let's talk about exactly who's about to get very rich and who's about to get left behind. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Entire countries built their economies on the ground beneath their feet, and space is about to make that ground a lot less valuable. Let's start with the losers, because honestly, this is the part that should worry us most. Some countries' entire economies are built on mining exports. South Africa produces roughly 70% of the world's platinum. If space mining crashes that price, we're not talking about a bad quarter. We're talking about a national crisis. The Democratic Republic of Congo supplies most of the world's cobalt, critical for batteries. If asteroid mining ever taps into that supply chain too, the impact could be devastating. And Russia? A huge portion of its state revenue comes from resource exports. Oil, metals, minerals. Undercut that, and you're not just hurting an economy. You're destabilizing a government. These aren't small side effects. We could be looking at millions of mining jobs disappearing and national budgets collapsing, all triggered by rocks falling from space. Now let's flip to the winners, and it's a much shorter list, because this race isn't about who has resources anymore. It's about who has rockets. The United States, through private companies, currently dominates launch capability. That's not a small advantage. That's the entire gateway to this new economy. China isn't far behind, aggressively investing in its own space program, because no major power wants to be locked out of what could be the biggest economic shift in human history. And smaller countries like Luxembourg have quietly positioned themselves as legal and financial hubs for space mining companies, essentially becoming the Switzerland of space law. So notice the pattern here. This isn't about who has the most gold underground anymore. It's about who can build, launch, and control a rocket. That's a complete reversal of the last 300 years of global power. Resource-rich nations used to hold the leverage. Soon, launch-capable nations will. And here's a question worth sitting with. If your country doesn't have a space program by the time this kicks off, are you a participant or just a spectator? This is why some analysts are calling it a survival race. Not for profit, but for national relevance in a world where the old rules of wealth no longer apply. But even if you have the rockets, who actually gives you legal permission to grab an asteroid in the first place? Turns out that answer is complicated. Because right now, there's a 60-year-old international treaty that technically says none of this is even allowed. Which raises a wild question. Is space mining legal, illegal, or somewhere in a gray zone nobody's actually tested yet? Let's dig into that, because the answer might genuinely surprise you. Welcome to what legal experts are literally calling the Wild West of space law. In 1967, at the height of the Cold War, major nations signed a treaty agreeing that no country could ever claim ownership of a celestial body. The idea was noble. Space belongs to everyone, not just the powerful. No flags, no borders, no ownership of the moon, Mars, or asteroids. But here's the loophole nobody saw coming. The treaty says nations can't own celestial bodies. It never clearly said private companies couldn't. And that loophole is exactly what modern space law has started to build on, especially through a newer agreement called the Artemis Accords. The Artemis Accords, led primarily by the United States and dozens of partner nations, essentially say, you can't own the asteroid, but you can own what you extract from it. It's a legal technicality, but it's a powerful one. You can't plant a flag on the rock, but you can absolutely take pieces of it home and sell them. So functionally, this creates something very close to a first-come, first-served system, where whoever gets there first with the technology essentially controls the resource. Which naturally raises a very real problem. What happens when two companies, or two countries, target the exact same asteroid at the exact same time? Right now, there's no clear international court, no space police, and no enforcement mechanism to settle that dispute. It's genuinely unregulated territory. Some experts believe this ambiguity is intentional. Nations don't want strict rules yet, because strict rules might limit their own future claims. It's a bit like international waters before modern maritime law existed. Everyone wants access, but nobody wants to be the one who agrees to limits first. And that historical pattern should make us a little nervous, because unclear rules plus enormous wealth has historically led to exactly one thing: conflict. Not necessarily missiles and warfare, at least not yet, but economic conflict, diplomatic pressure, and a very real possibility of a new kind of Cold War. And honestly, if you think claiming an asteroid is the hard part, wait until we talk about what happens after you've actually mined it. Because getting the resources out of the rock is only step one. Getting them back to Earth is an entirely different challenge. And that challenge has a bottleneck, a choke point in space that could end up being more strategically important than any ocean shipping lane on Earth. Let's talk about the actual logistics of moving trillions of dollars of material across millions of kilometers of empty space. Because mining is genuinely the easy part. Refining raw asteroid material and transporting it safely back to Earth? That's where the real engineering nightmare begins. Raw asteroid material isn't useful on its own. It has to be refined in space, in zero gravity, using processes we've barely tested outside a lab. That refined material then has to survive re-entry, or be transferred to stable staging points before making its way down to Earth's surface. And this is exactly where Lagrange points come in. 5 specific spots in space where gravity from the Earth and Sun perfectly balance out. At these points, a spacecraft can essentially park using very little fuel, making them perfect natural rest stops for cargo, refineries, and fuel depots. In other words, these points are about to become the gas stations, ports, and checkpoints of the entire space economy. And whoever controls a Lagrange point effectively controls the flow of trillions of dollars of material passing through it. Sound familiar? It's basically the Strait of Gibraltar or the Suez Canal, except instead of controlling oil tankers, you're controlling asteroid cargo worth more than most national economies. Which means the next major geopolitical flashpoint might not even be a country or a border. It might be a single, invisible point floating in space. And historically, whoever controls a choke point controls the leverage. Ask any nation that's ever fought over a canal, a strait, or a shipping lane. So, it's not unreasonable to imagine future military or economic posturing centered entirely around securing these gravitational parking spots. Some space policy analysts are already calling this the next real Cold War, not fought over land, but fought over orbital position. And unlike Earth's borders, there's no ocean, no mountain range, and no natural barrier out there to slow anyone down. It's just physics, fuel, and whoever gets there first. And that's a genuinely uncomfortable combination when trillions of dollars are on the line. So let's step back for a second. We've covered the economics, the winners and losers, the legal gray zone, and now the physical choke points of this new frontier. Which brings us to the real question underneath all of this. Is this heading toward a better future, or a more dangerous one? Let's be fair here and look at both sides, because this story genuinely could go 2 very different directions. On the optimistic side, imagine a world where precious metals are so abundant. Industries that depend on them become dramatically cheaper. Electronics, medicine, clean energy technology. Some economists genuinely believe this could trigger a kind of post-scarcity era, where the cost of materials stops being the barrier to human progress. In that version of the future, space mining doesn't destroy economies. It upgrades them, freeing up money and labor for entirely new industries we haven't even imagined yet. But now, let's look at the other side, because history rarely hands over massive wealth without a fight over who gets to control it. In this version, resource-dependent nations collapse economically before they can adapt. Launch-capable nations consolidate power, and legal gray zones turn into real disputes. And disputes over Lagrange points, asteroid claims, and orbital territory slowly escalate from paperwork into something far more serious. The honest truth is, we don't know which version we're heading toward, and that's not a cop-out answer. Nobody actually knows yet. What we do know is that the decisions being made right now, quietly, in treaties, boardrooms, and government offices, will shape which future we end up in. This isn't happening in some distant century. Missions to asteroids like Psyche are already underway. The clock on this is running right now. So whether you find this exciting or genuinely a little unsettling, one thing is certain. The era of earthbound scarcity is ending, one way or another. And how humanity handles that transition might end up defining the next century more than anything happening on the ground beneath us right now. So here's the big question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want you to think about this before you answer it. If you personally owned the rights to one asteroid, worth more than most countries' entire economies, what would you actually do with that wealth? Would you flood the market and cash out immediately? Would you hold on to it patiently? Or would you use it to build something the world's never seen before? Drop your honest answer in the comments below. I read every single one. and I'm genuinely curious what this community would actually do with that kind of power. If this video actually changed how you think about the future of resources and power, hit that subscribe button, because this is exactly the kind of story we dig into here. We're not just talking about space for the sake of space. We're talking about how it's going to rewrite power, wealth, and survival right here on Earth. And trust me, this asteroid story is just the beginning. There's an entire new world order quietly forming above our heads. If you want to understand where global power is really headed next, this is the channel to be on. We break these shifts down before most people are even talking about them. Thanks for watching all the way through. Seriously, that means a lot. I'll see you in the next one, where we dig into another story shaping our future. This has been GeoMind Studio. Stay curious, stay informed, and I'll catch you next time.